It's one of those things where every day you pass people and you have no idea what they're going through, and you have no idea how something very small that you could do could change everything for them. And I find myself thinking about that all the time now.
Tuscaloosa, Alabama, June of 2007.
This is Common Ties.
Common Ties.
Common Ties.
Common Ties.
This is Common Ties, and freelance writer Carmen K. Sisson talked about and recorded her story from her home in Tuscaloosa.
If there was one thing I didn't have that day, it was time. No time for things to go right. Definitely no time for things to go wrong. But things were going to go wrong. Things were going to come to an absolute grinding halt. As a journalist, I spend a lot of time on the road, and here I was again, 2 hours from the pasture where I was to photograph a wedding. Sitting in a one-light town, watching a graffiti-laden freight train wearily shuffle by, I fumed. With more than 200 miles left to cover, I could pull it off, if this damn train would make like an Amtrak and get on gone, as people here like to say. Finally, I threw a fine spray of gravel as I kicked the car into gear and headed north. Cresting a hill at 80 miles per hour, I felt an odd sensation, something like a giant rubber band pulling my 99 Taurus backward. The scalding heat radiating from the engine, coupled with an intense burning odor of obscure part you can't afford, told me something important. I was screwed. It wasn't enough that I was skirting eviction daily, or that my refrigerator and computer had died last week, or that relationship stress was pushing me to the end of my tether. It wasn't enough to be living constantly on edge, never having enough food, enough money, enough time. God, the time! I was going to be late for the wedding. My career, along with my car, was going up in smoke. 3 days later, I was certain that life was on a downward slide. The car remained abandoned in a no-name town on the way to nowhere. I couldn't scrape up the cash to make a call, let alone afford the $300 that towing companies were asking to bring it home. I called my friends, I called my family, I called on God. And then I posted a message on an internet forum. I'd written there sporadically, but not often. But desperate times called for desperate measures, and I was desperate. I needed the name of a good mechanic I could trust in a town where I knew no one. Within the hour I had received an answer, but not the one I expected. "What's the address? Someone's on their way to get your car and tow it back to Tuscaloosa." "I don't have money for that," I typed back. "I need to get it fixed there." "Taken care of. Call Mr. Transmission and give him the address." Before I could respond, the stranger wrote again. "Don't waste time thanking me. No thanks required. Call." It was a holiday, and I doubted that the shop would be open, but I dialed the number anyway. The owner was waiting. He said he had a friend who ran a towing company. There'd be no charge. As for the car, we'd see what it needed once it was back on home turf. The stranger wrote that evening to make sure that the car arrived safely, and then there was no further contact. The next day the mechanic called, and my heart sank. He had completed the repairs without even calling in an estimate. The bill totaled $2,700. I started to cry, great hiccuping tears of shame and frustration. Now I owed this man more money than I made in 3 months. "Your car is paid for," he said. "Your friend paid the bill." When he learned the whole story, how a person I'd never met answered a prayer I'd never asked, the mechanic was moved. Suddenly a very strange story became more odd. He sent me to the Ford dealership, telling me to go to the back door and ask for Devon. There, Devon handed me a bag of parts and told me to go to an auto service center a few miles down the road and ask for Terry. By this time, I wasn't even asking questions. I was just following blind faith. Sometimes, when every red light and freight train conspires against me, I close my eyes and think of the people who helped. They didn't have to stop what they were doing that day. They didn't have to contribute money, or hands, or time. But they did. and by doing so they not only repaired my car, they repaired my heart.
You've been listening to Common Ties. I'm the editor, Elizabeth Moore, and this story was produced by Walter Dixon.